All right, let's dive in. In this explainer, we're tackling the final, really dramatic 20 years of the American West. This is it. This is the period where the whole myth of the Wild West slams into reality and gets transformed into a settled, organized, and, well, a conquered landscape.
So, you have to ask, how on earth did this all happen so fast? I mean, 20 years to tame a continent? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was this perfect storm of new technology, crazy climate shifts, and really aggressive government policy that just completely reshaped everything. Historians call this the closing of the frontier, and we're going to break down exactly what that meant for everyone living there. So, first things first, let's talk about the land itself. The whole idea of the West was built on these huge open plains. But those plains were about to get hit with a 1-2 punch, a revolutionary new technology, and some absolutely brutal weather.
Okay, this looks like just a fence, right? But no. The invention of barbed wire in 1874 was a complete and total game changer. All of a sudden, you could carve up that endless open range into little squares of private property. This one simple invention basically slammed the door on the era of the great cattle drives and the free-roaming cowboy. It created the modern, fenced-in ranch that we think of today.
And here is where that new technology collided with Mother Nature, with absolutely devastating results. See, the cattle boom led to massive overgrazing, which left the herds really vulnerable. And then, bam, the winter of 1886-87 hit. They called it the Great Die-Up. Millions of cattle, trapped by fences with no food or shelter, they just froze or starved to death. After that disaster, the old way of life, it was just over. The future was all about smaller herds on fenced-in land, a future made possible by barbed wire.
So, with the open range now literally fenced off, the pressure for people to settle the rest of the land just became unstoppable. And this sparked these final, frantic waves of migration, a mad scramble for thousands of people to claim their piece of the West before it was all gone. But this wasn't just about getting rich. For thousands of African Americans who were fleeing the violence and crushing poverty of the South after the Civil War, the West meant something so much more profound. It meant freedom. The Exodus movement to Kansas wasn't just a migration. It was this powerful search for true liberty, the chance to finally own land and build their own communities far away from their former oppressors. To really speed things up, the U.S. government made a really dramatic and, frankly, controversial move. It took 2 million acres of land that was supposed to be protected Indian territory, and opened it all up for settlement. All of it, in a single day. The result? One of the most chaotic land grabs in American history. The Oklahoma land rush was just pure, unfiltered chaos and desperation. But you have to see it for what it really was. It was a massive symbolic act by the U.S. government. It was them literally erasing the Indian frontier from the map and replacing it permanently with tens of thousands of new white homesteads. Okay, so the land is being fenced in, it's being settled, but it wasn't exactly a peaceful process. Not even close. The final piece of this whole puzzle is conflict. Imposing order on the West meant everything from those legendary shootouts and dusty boomtowns all the way to the systematic, government-led conquest of the last Native American resistance. Now, to really get a handle on the violence of this time, you have to look at it on two totally different levels. On one hand, you've got the super famous gunfight at the OK Corral. That's a local, personal squabble. It's about trying to bring law to a single rowdy town. But then you have the Wounded Knee Massacre. That is something else entirely. That is the federal government using its full military might to crush the spirit and resistance of an entire people. And for anyone studying this, here's a huge tip. It's the significance of an event like the OK Corral that really matters. It's not just about the gunfight. The event became this powerful symbol for the whole country. It represented that chaotic, lawless frontier, finally and violently giving way to organized federal authority. It was the taming of the West in miniature.
This quote? Wow. It's really chilling, and it comes from the founder of one of the government's biggest Indian boarding schools. It basically became the unofficial playbook for federal policy. The goal wasn't just to win a war, it was cultural annihilation. The idea was to literally kill the Indian inside a person, erase their identity, their religion, their whole way of life, in order to save the man by forcing them to become like white Americans.
So that policy, that chilling idea, it has a name: assimilation. The whole point was to force Native Americans to just abandon their culture and adopt white American customs. And this wasn't just some vague idea, It was put into action through two really devastating and very deliberate government strategies.
It was this calculated two-pronged attack. The first part was military and economic, the deliberate extermination of the buffalo. This was not an accident. The army knew that by destroying the buffalo, they were destroying the Plains Indians' entire way of life, their food, their shelter, their spiritual center, basically starving them into submission. The second prong was legal, the Dawes Act. This law broke up the communal tribal lands into small private family farms. It was a direct assault designed to break the very idea of the tribe itself. Together, these two things were a final, crushing blow.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground. A lot of complex, heavy stuff. How do you pull all this together and really show that you understand it? Well, thinking like a historian really just boils down to two key skills. First up, you have got to connect the dots. The best analysis never talks about these things in a bubble. So, for example, don't just say, barbed wire was invented, and then later say, the open range ended. Explain how the technology of the fence directly caused the economic collapse of the old way of ranching. You see that chain of cause and effect? That's everything.
And the second skill, which is maybe the most important, is to always be asking yourself that one simple question. So what? Why does any of this matter? The real deep understanding comes when you can explain the long-term consequences of an event for everybody involved, for the settlers, the cowboys, the government, and especially for the Native American tribes whose entire world was being turned upside down.
Which really brings us to the big, complicated question at the heart of all this. Was the American West won, or was it destroyed? I mean, for millions of new settlers, the closing of the frontier was an incredible story of progress, of opportunity, of building a new life. But for the people who had lived there for centuries, it was a story of conquest, of being displaced, and of having their culture systematically wiped out. The key to really understanding this period is to realize that both of these things were happening at the exact same time.